Hello, welcome. I'm Les Posen. This is the second YouTube video for 2020. Helpful, I hope, for those of you who suffer with anxiety, in particular fear of flying, but not restricted to fear of flying. It could also be other areas of anxiety in your life, and I think you'll find if you look through the series of videos, there'll be something here that'll be helpful for you. The last time I set up a video, I was on board ship, offering lectures on a Royal Caribbean cruise line up and down the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. Lots of Americans and Canadians and English and many Chinese as well. Great trip. Here you can see a picture of me up on stage delivering one of my lectures. We did 5 on board as we cruise up and down the Great Barrier Reef, stopping at various places along the way. It was a great way to have a little bit of a holiday, working holiday so to speak. I also want to thank, since the time I made that video, all these people that you can see here over on my right, your left screen, all these new subscribers. Thank you very much for coming along, and I hope, having seen one of my videos, you pop by and have a look at the other ones and click through and have a bit of a play with some of the ideas. Today, while the list keeps on scrolling through, I want to focus a little bit more on some of the cognitive therapy that has probably become the most evidence-based way of working to help people overcome anxiety. The other forms of work are some of the more esoteric kind of things, tapping and eye movement and what else? We've got your classic psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, try to drill down to find out what in one's life's origins might be playing out on board a plane or in a train or whatever it might be. But the most, and there's also hypnosis as well. And all of these are kind of interesting in their own way, but none of them have got the evidence base that the cognitive therapy plus exposure using airline seats and exposure using headsets and things can do, plus going on real flights. I took a flight this week with a patient who's preparing to fly Melbourne to Los Angeles, never flown before on a large international jet, and while the simulation I started with is an Airbus A320, which is in fact the same plane type that we flew down to Hobart this week on Tuesday. I also have a new system which I'm using. This is the Oculus Quest, and this new system also does fear of flying, and the module in there is a wide body aircraft like a 777, and that's the same sort of aircraft that she'll be taking next week to Los Angeles. So I'm very eager to see how well she has been prepared for those trips. Each person who comes to see me, as it will be the case for you, presents with a variety of scenarios which for them act as their triggers, which leads to the classic signals of anxiety, strong sensations, thoughts which lead to avoidance and safety behavior. Safety behavior is kind of aligned with superstitious behavior. If I do this, because it's worked last time, it's less likely, or it's going to lead to my better management of myself. Unfortunately, safety behaviors tend to get stronger and stronger, leading ultimately to complete avoidance of the activity that you really want to be doing. So we want to be very careful of what those safety behaviors might be. The thing I want to focus on today is for you to know a little bit more about how your brain works, so that we can better use some of the cognitive behavioral work that is, as I said before, the most evidence-based. I want you to think about the brain as having 2 primary functions. There's lots of complicated things that it does. It's very complicated. People have we've learned more about the brain the last dozen years than we have the last 5,000 years. But still, and we're learning more. But one of the ways to think about it is that it does 2 complicated things, and we'll simplify it down into 2 main events that it does. Number 1, because our brain cells fire in patterns, and you can increase those patterns by learning new things and build up new patterns. Our brains are predictive objects, predictive computers, if you like. They're making predictions. The familiar part for that might be you use something like Siri or another app on your Samsung phone, if it might be, and you look in your diary, and if there's a regular thing that you do every Sunday or every Tuesday, wherever it might be, you may notice that it's a bit smart. It actually says, oh, it'll take 8 minutes to get from here to there, because that's what you regularly do on a Tuesday. Rather than you having to ask, how long will it take? It pops it up automatically as a notification. So it's making predictions that you're going to do this again on Tuesday, or you're going to go for that drive to that same place on Sunday. Happens for me all the time. So our brains kind of operate like that. They're constantly making predictions as to what's going to happen next. Okay? That's a very useful thing. And because we're human beings, kind of at the top of the tree when it comes to how things work on this planet, we have an addition that my hairy friend, where is he? Scout back there, doesn't have, and that's the ability to use language to help us make predictions, to put those predictions into words, and then to be able to draw them or to describe them to other people. And language allows us to have a past tense that we can learn from, a present tense that we can experience now, and a future tense that allows us to predict what's going to happen. So that's number one thing to think about, how the brain works. That's very useful for us. When it comes to anxiety, what we often do is take the prediction abilities of the brain and take it beyond what is actually useful to us. And so we make predictions which only take up perhaps a small set of probabilities and say, well, that's for sure going to happen to me. So one errs on the side of better be safe than sorry. So why do I want to do this in the first place? Because I'm probably going to be in danger, given what I experienced the last time. Okay? So that's number one thing that the brain does, makes predictions. Builds up patterns and makes predictions, lots of shortcuts. Number two that it does, it's a monitoring device. It's constantly monitoring what's going on both inside our bodies, that's called interoceptive monitoring, and it also monitors what's going on around us in the outside world, the exteroceptive monitoring. We're very familiar with that one because it's what our eyes and our ears, taste, sensations that allow us to touch things and feel things. That's what that's useful for. But the interoceptive, we often can miss out on knowing what does it mean. So some of the most crucial things that help us to stay alive, things like blood pressure, we're often not aware that it's gone up too high. It's not one of those things you actually feel, oh, I've got high blood pressure. And that's why sometimes people get surprised. They go to the doctor and say, oh, your blood pressure's up, what's going on? There are other ones that we can also feel, but also misinterpret. So if your blood sugar levels suddenly fall, you might feel dizzy and wonder, is it something I ate, when it's in fact low blood sugar? Or it might be a feeling that the world is tilting, which could be low blood sugar, but it also could be an inner ear infection that is causing your balance to go off. So there's a variety of internal sensations that feed back to the brain, and it monitors. And if they go out of parameter, not a signal, a one-off measure, but a range, and if it goes outside that range for us, we can expect most of the time to get a signal that says there's something amiss. And what I find a lot with my anxious patients is an easy misinterpretation of these signals and a desire to switch off the alarms by using distraction or alcohol or medication. And that's not necessarily a great thing to do. You want those alarms because they're telling you something. It's what you do with the alarm that will be the difference between you becoming a successful flyer and you avoiding it altogether, or having to use medication or alcohol or whatever it might be to try and subdue these signals. Okay? So one of the things we've got to be careful of is not to be afraid of these signals, but to explore them, to accept them, to understand them. And what I do with my patients, and this might sound a little horrific for some of you, is to make the sensations that they're going to experience in that set of seats, or if we drive, whatever it might be, even more intense than what they might be on a flight, even more intense. And we do that by, say, breathing through a straw, or holding ourselves really tight and stopping breathing, or if it's the seatbelt on, make it really tight. Why? So that you've got evidence that as much as this is uncomfortable and I really don't like it, I can actually be with it. I prefer it not to be there. And of course, for that reason, you want to make sure that you're not contributing even more to it by inadvertently holding your breath or going all tense. So you want to become aware of what you're doing. But what you want to be able to do is, firstly, accept that I've got a series of alarms. That's a normal part of having a brain, to have a series of alarms that tells you if I'm going out of parameter. But those alarms sometimes can be added to unnecessarily. And what we've got to learn to do, as pilots do, if there's an alarm that goes off in the flight deck, is firstly recall the alarm. That is, switch it off, because you can't think straight if the alarm's going beep, beep, beep. Just imagine you've bought a new house. The previous owners have left you with a 4-digit alarm code that you've got to punch in when you walk into the house, or before you walk into the house. And you're in a rush to get into the house to answer the phone or to go to the loo, whatever it might be. You rush in, you forget that the alarm has been set, and it goes off, and it's really loud. And you can't quite remember, you haven't written it down, you can't quite remember what those 4 digits are. And with the alarm so loud, it makes it even more difficult to recall what's going on. So that's kind of what happens to us. We've got to learn to recall the alarm, and the easiest way to recall the alarms to start with are, number 1, accept it's an alarm going off. 2, it's a signal, not a sign of danger. It's a signal to me to attend to something. 3, I need to recall the alarm in order to pursue what's going on here. And the best way to either recall the alarm or to lower it so you can think straight is probably via your breathing. Slow it down to something like 6 breaths in cycles per minute from the diaphragm. Loosen up any clothing. If it means closing your eyes for a moment, that's fine, but that just for a minute or so, that represents roughly 3 to 4 breaths at that sort of cycles. Okay? Then you can start to work through, well, what am I going to do with these signals that I'm receiving here? The best way, of course, to deal with these signals is to have rehearsed what to do before you get there. So what I will often ask patients to do is get a hold of some of those YouTube in-flight videos. We've talked about this in these videos before, and practice being with them. Go to those parts of the flight where there's perhaps a little bit of turbulence or a takeoff, or those areas in your flight experience which is challenging. Perhaps it's the boarding of the aircraft, going down the jetway, greeting the flight attendant. These might be the things that you give a 10 to or a 6 to. Aim for those ones to try and bring them not to 0, but perhaps under 5 down to 4, where it's still manageable but not overwhelming. And once your brain starts to learn the pattern that you can bring it down from a 7 down to a 4, you'll find that it doesn't go up in time. It doesn't get up to a 7 in the first place. It will go up to a 4, and you've just got to accept that a 4 is okay. And then the more you practice, it won't get to a 4 the next time. It'll get to maybe a 2. And it may be that for many of you, a 2 is acceptable. Do not aim for 0, because that means I'm perfect, and that is not going to occur. You want to get down to a 2 or a 3, but more importantly, know what to do if you get to a 6 or a 7. Okay? And be wise to try and learn techniques such as the breathing, but also challenging some of your ideas of how bad this is. Well, it's uncomfortable. I don't like it. I prefer it not to be there. It's a bit like me being chucked into a middle seat when a flight's cancelled, and I've organised months in advance to have an aisle seat, which is my preference, not a demand, it's my preference. And now all of a sudden, on my cancelled flight, I'm put on to the next one. It's completely booked. They've got one seat for me. You can have the middle seat. Well, I'm going to take it. Don't like it, not comfortable, but I want to get to where I'm going. If I'm lucky, I might be able to walk around the plane or maybe swap with someone. Probably unlikely, but I need to get to where I'm going. Okay? So part of the work with air travel is to accept that there are certain things that you can't completely control, and you know what? That's okay. You're in control of when you say to yourself, I don't need to control those things because it doesn't add any value to this experience. Okay? So one of the things you want to do after you've done a flight, whether it be a real one, a virtual one, or one on one of the in-flight videos from YouTube is to sit back a moment and say, well, what was going on for me? Was it as bad as I thought it was going to be? Did my prediction side of my brain get a little bit out of whack, and have I now been brought back into a realistic measure of what's actually going to be like? Have I redrawn the probabilities down from a 7 down to a 5? That's progress. Was it as bad as I expected it to be? And then what you want to do is go in and do some exercises where you're actually going to increase the level of discomfort. Sounds weird, I know. So for instance, if one of the things you fear is breaking out into a bit of a sweat because that's a signal that I'm losing control, that's an alarm going off for me, one of the things that one can do is put on a really heavy winter's jacket, get a hot air device for that you're going to warm your head or a hair dryer, blow it on your face from a distance so you get really hot and bothered. Then put it down and see if you can recover from that on your own. Now, sometimes you need a little bit of help to recover. Try and do it on your own first with breathing, but sometimes you can use these sort of wet ones just to tap with the wet one. Don't rub, just tap to try and fool your brain into believing that you're actually increasing your sense of recovery. So what you're trying to do here is go outside into discomfort, return to more comfort, and then go out again. Do it several times. Those of you who exercise at the gym know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to go into a zone of discomfort, lifting weights, put them down, take 30 seconds to recover, and then go back and hit it again, knowing that with each set it's going to get harder and harder to complete the final 10th or 12th repetition in that set. You know what I'm talking about. It's the same with runners, so not lifting weights, but doing sprints. That's how you improve either your strength or your recovery, or whatever it might be. And it's going to be the same in this domain as well. So I'm going to be doing more of these sort of news, but I think the most important thing right now is to practice some of these things. Approach your scary thing, whether it be for real, whether it be using the YouTube videos. If you know a practitioner who does this as well, that's one way of doing it. Not the complete answer, but it's certainly a much better step forward than simply trying to use imagination, because part of you will just try and shut down on that one. All right. Subscribe if you're new to this video series, but also send me questions in the comment section. I can't do therapy over YouTube to an unknown audience, although I'm getting to know many of you quite well, I think. But do write questions and I can give a more generic answer and give you some homework tips as well to do before my next video in the next little while. Okay, I hope this was helpful for you today. Send me some questions. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.